Couch there, you can just go sleep.
Yeah, it's my turn.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to round 3 of Malaya Interschool. My name is Daphne. I'll be your chair today. Handling with me will be Aaron and Nisha. On the motion, this House believes that progressive social movements in developing countries should prioritize campaigning for changes to laws over recipes and beliefs. I call the Prime Minister to start this debate.
I can see the speaker. I might be wrong, but you can double check if you want to.
I don't know how to fix that without the toilet.
You can just put more chairs on it.
Oh. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, since prehistoric times, thousands of years, we fought for equal rights for everyone. Whether it be the feminist and the suffragette feminist fight that we had in the past decade, or whether it be when Malala Yousafzai almost died, when she fought for the rights of education for children, I think it's extremely important to note that campaigning for changes to official laws is fundamental for actual change to happen, rather than really garnering more support at the end of the day. I think it's fundamentally important at the end of the day. So the first half of my speech is dealing with, number one, a few clarifications as to what this debate is about. But second is also, I'll bring to you two points of substantive. Number one, why is it that we believe that these progressive social movements have an obligation to prioritize the change of laws rather than comparative? But secondly, I'll talk to you why it's exceptionally important. Why it's exceptionally important when these progressive social movements prioritize on the change of laws rather than the exact opposite. Number one, the clarification. So how do we define progressive social movements in developing countries? We say it's that of LGBTQIA movements in Malaysia, whether it be the feminist groups in many parts of Indonesia. Those are the kinds of progressive social movements that we declare. So how are we going to prioritize? The change of official laws over change in mass attitudes and beliefs? We say that the social movements, like the LGBTQ movements, go out on the streets actively promoting or actively forcing the government to change the laws, whether it be accepting gay rights in Malaysia and things like that. We aspire a world where these people bring banners to pressure the government in changing the laws, actively changing the laws. But what's the converse that you have on that side? The converse is just focusing on garnering more support rather than focusing on passing a law. So number one, why is it that we believe that progressive social movements have an active obligation to only prioritize campaigning the change of laws and government policies, and why it's good? Number one, I think it's exceptionally important to note that progressive social movements in Malaysia or in Indonesia, in in developing countries, whether it be the LGBTQ movement or even the rising feminist groups in Malaysia, we see that those groups are already able to garner support in concentrated areas. Like for example, in Kuala Lumpur, when we had the feminist, we had the female day, right? So those are circumstances that means that they're already able to garner support in that particular circumstance. While acknowledging that in many parts of developing countries there are conservatives that are against these social movements, I think it's exceptionally important to note that these groups are actually already highly susceptible to counter narratives. That means that whatever effort you try to change in mass attitude and beliefs are unlikely to work, because more likely in developing countries, when we talk about Islam culture and things like that, more likely they wouldn't be able to buy into that narrative of accepting gay people at the end of the day. We think your effort at the end of the day comes at a deadlock or at best a standstill, ladies and gentlemen, because you cannot change a culture or change a religion of a certain developing country at the end of the day. We think your effort will not go anywhere, right? Before we continue, yeah, sure.
So if these counter narratives are so strong towards these minority groups, how then do you get those policies actually passed and legislated?
Thank you. I'll prove to you, number one, why these progressive social movements are already able to garner support. Number one, I think it's generally important to note that in concentrated areas, like for example in Kuala Lumpur, there are already people who are seen as woke or liberal. They are able to accept liberal narratives, for instance, being gay or feminist rights, that they already exist. So why do we have an obligation specifically to prioritize the change of laws? Number one, urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, realize that immediate action to push the government to change certain policies is exceptionally needed when, for example, gay crimes is at a high, when gay people are already being hated. For instance, ladies and gentlemen, when Margaret Sanger, United States-led battle for the reproductive rights of women in United States of America, she did not have the actual, like everyone supporting her at that particular circumstance. She might have her friends supporting that anyway. But what's most important is that we are able to have as well spark a discussion as well as multi-layered discourse with regards to this. We say sure, counter narratives might exist and might be strong. At the very least, we are able to have a proper debate, for instance, to talk about why it's important. So why is it under urgency, right? Ladies and gentlemen, when realize that government policies can change and adapt with time, right? So when you are able to pressure the government to make it more likely, we can say that government will indeed change their laws and as such. Sure.
So in majority of circumstances, the way a lot of social movements have worked is that they garner large support bases in order for them to be able to riot, in order for them to be able to challenge governments. At the point in which you only have these people in your liberal sects, how do you get change for an entire nation?
I think change, okay, this is the top-down argument, it's on my second substantive, right? The change as well, the best case scenario. So secondly, right, so why is there an obligation for these campaigns to, these social movements to prioritize on campaigning? Number two is to maintain legitimacy in the minority of people that actually supported them anyway. Because realize that you can see that the social movements have some support at the end of the day. But when you tend to focus on little things like, no thank you, like for example, change in mass attitudes and beliefs, we think you aren't able to maintain the legitimacy of your own social movement when you seem less active in the eyes of the people, you seem less aggressive in that particular circumstance, right? So why is this good? Number one, we're able to faster the change of laws, for instance, right? Because realize that government policies can change through time, and we say that more likely the best case scenario, we say the social movements are either of the LGBTQ movements can have their gay rights in Malaysia, for instance. In those circumstances, it's good, right? Because you are able to enact the law. What are the laws that kind of, it looks like police officers or people who are in authority are able to protect this minority that you want to have at the end of the day. Realize that if we don't enact these laws as fast as possible, Asian, more likely they're going to be victimized at a particular circumstance. But secondly, we are able to garner more support at the end of the day. How do I structure this, right? Because realize when you talk about being progressive, when you talk about being liberal, I think it also involves a lot of debate in Australia, like Kuala Lumpur, right? In those circumstances, I think more people in Jakarta or Kuala Lumpur more likely be able to support and subscribe to that idea to begin with when they seem as a legitimate active group group that continuously fights for at the end of the day. But number three, the reason why this is good is because you are able to have people less victimized at the end of the day, right? Because it's so important to enact the law to ensure that these people are protected, to ensure that women have rights on abortion, for instance, when it's a right that they should have. I'm exceptionally proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for the speech. Now I'd like to call upon your opposition.
Go ahead.
The Alabama Heartbeat Bill is on its way to reversing Roe v. Wade, a constitutional right that was granted to women, recognizing their bodily autonomy, recognizing they have the right to these things. And this is a huge issue. We're going into the Constitution, probably the only thing Americans really hold near and dear to their heart, and saying, no, we need to reverse this right now. This shows how volatile laws can be, especially when you're talking about certain scenarios where the attitude of people is as of a mass scale as the attitude against progressive social movements within developing nations. Because you have to recognize, within these areas, it is more than just your small Alabama state in the middle of the US. It is huge countries where a large majority of the population is averse to the ideas they are trying to bring on the table, whether we as debaters can agree to them as rightful or not. These people are against these values, and they look at these people, whether they are LGBT individuals, whether they are people who are fighting for anti-discrimination laws, as people who are violating their lives. And we think that it's very important for you to realize that the laws that you want to pass are only going to stay in the law book if the views of the people on the ground do not change. What are the arguments I'm going to present to you in my speech? First, as a tangible argument on the benefits on this change of priority, and the second thing on a principal argumentation as to why necessarily by focusing on fighting for these laws, you put yourself in a position where your government oppresses you even further later on in the day. But before that, a couple of rebuttals. Firstly, as to the idea that changing narrative is difficult. This is something that we agree upon. So there's a trade-off we're willing to make, right? If it takes a longer time for us to be able to one day in the future achieve whatever it may be that these individuals want, we would rather go for that if it means that the individuals on the ground are able to believe in the things that these people are able to push for, or at the very least are able to respect the changes that they're trying to bring into the government. But secondly, as to the top-down obligation where once you pass laws, you get more support and laws change for the better, we don't necessarily think this is true. Especially when you're talking about the context of developing nations, more often than not, these laws are very poorly enforced due to the people within the system and how this system systematically oppresses these individuals. But secondly, just because you have a law written, doesn't mean people are going to suddenly start flocking to you for support just because the government says these people deserve these rights. In fact, it is likely for these individuals to continue living in their little bubbles, continuously discriminating against other people because of a viewpoint that these individuals do not deserve the law that was granted to them. Maybe a better way is to start some kind of discourse, treat them worse, and maybe reverse the law, which was exactly what happened within the Alabama bill. First argument, as to when we're talking about the tangible benefits, what type of laws are we talking about, right? Basic things, abortion laws, LGBT rights, anti-discrimination movements. How have these movements been affected in developing nations? Firstly, developing nations are not open to these values, right? They're very different from Western liberal democracies. And sure, maybe in select bubbles, maybe in the center of the city of KL, they're supported, but there's in very few minority cases that exist. More likely than not, most of these discussions are controversial in nature to the people who are passing these laws, and the people on the ground are averse to the idea of such discussions. Second, these social movements have a lack of funding due to the attitudes against them within these areas. This means from the very get-go, not only were they disenfranchised from the start based on the treatment that other people have given them, they themselves do not have enough resources to be able to blow it all away somewhere and prioritize it full force. But thirdly, the lives of these people are more than just affected by the treatment of them by the government. It's more affected by the people around them and the way they perceive their existence to be. So just because the government says we're going to give this LGBT person rights, doesn't mean that baker in the bakery won't bake your cake because you're marrying someone of the same gender and he cannot agree with you. And this doesn't only exist at large scales in developing nations, it also exists in developed nations, which we look up to, especially when we're talking about social progression, let alone these countries that are open to your ideas. Next, why are legal changes something that is problematic? Later. Firstly, the nature of these laws are very volatile and are not sustainable so long that the attitude of these developing nations does not change. The way these laws are given to you are as simple as the way they can be taken away from you. And more often than not, people outside of these movements do not like you from the very get-go, right? They backlash, and more often than not, this backlash leads to your law being at a high risk of being taken away, especially when this thing happens all the time when you're talking about developing nations. This is proof as to how influential it is, right? Even in developed nations where we've been supporting women like abortion rights and all these things like the US, there are already people out there trying to take it down, and as of this point in time, they're highly successful in doing so. Let alone a country in which individuals on the ground are unwilling to support your law, we don't necessarily think that law is something which is sustainable. But secondly, assuming this law does sustain the test of time, we think it will be poorly enforced due to the nature of the attitude of these people on the ground. So even if they get the words that will give you protection in the law book, that doesn't necessarily give them the treatment they deserve. Your policemen won't protect your ethnic minorities if they think badly of them and their mass attitudes of them allow them to get away with it due to the systematic failures in order to enforce this law. But combined with the fact that the discrimination truly comes from the people on the ground to begin with, this continues on and perpetuates itself into even worse lives for these people across the board. Because now you're put in a picture and people they are not. How does outside change that? I think changing the mass attitude and scale on the ground can ultimately lead to the laws that will more likely be sustainable and more likely be supported. But even if those laws don't happen, we think the treatment of these people on the ground is something which is much better for on the outside, because even if those laws don't exist, there wouldn't be a need for these laws to exist if the people on the ground aren't messing up their lives for the rest of eternity. Any POIs?
How do we ensure urgency when the same gay individual on your side of the house will be victimized and be beaten up as compared to our world when they are protected by laws?
Okay, firstly, how does pushing for laws suddenly fight for that urgency? But secondly, we think the urgency doesn't exist in either platform because nobody is willing to support you. It's very important to recognize that people on the ground who are LGBTQ in Malaysia don't think twice about the LGBT community, because to them there is no reason why we should be helping these individuals regardless of whether they exist in our country or not. We don't necessarily think you've proven why the urgency exists anyway. But on a principle level, when you're talking about why necessarily this particular policy allows them to break free of the oppressive cycle, there's these individuals continuously oppressing them, is because their side, when you continuously push for laws and assuming in their best case these laws do get granted to them, it pushes for complacency, especially when we're talking about the actions of the people on the ground, because of the understanding that we've given you a law that can protect you. Even if this law isn't enforced, and even if this law doesn't help you out at the end of the day, it no longer becomes that sense of urgency that you want. They're pushing onto other people to act the way that they're supposed to behave, especially when you're around people. More rather than not, especially when you're talking about people on the ground and the way that they treat other people, they don't care about the laws that you pass, right? Especially when you're talking about laws that are very poorly enforced, they have already been present within the status quo, like basic things like work rights for women, or whether women should be allowed to express themselves at work, wear a hijab in certain countries, etc. Right? It's very important to note that for years and decades on end, fighting for laws has been the only thing we've been prioritizing. And thus far, sure, we get a couple of votes by the few politicians who may vote on our laws, but at the end of the day, these laws are never enforced. These people don't get the rights that they deserve, and these privileged individuals use this as ammo and say, we've given you what you wanted, time to step up. Extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. Now I'd like to call upon the
Yeah.
I'm of work society. Yeah. Hey, your pen's here now. Don't have motion. The true victims of this debate currently live in shackles. They live in shackles knowing the fact that they have no alternative to be able to access the circumstances that they live in. They live in the fact that there's no one there to support them. They live in a society, a media structure, a liberal structure, the way that they talk to people, the way that they converse with people, knowing that their existence is something that's false, knowing that they are wrong, and knowing that they are against God, against the country, or against morality. All these things are real-life examples and reasons to why individuals on the ground who are part of these victims do not want to come out and do not want to come and challenge anything going on within developing countries. We recognize that a lot of women within India supported Narendra Modi and didn't want to go and fight and campaign with, for example, the Congressional House or the Congressional Party because of these reasons, because of fear, because they feel that they are wrong, because they feel that they are different. All these things and all this change can only happen of victims come together to spearhead these movements. A couple of things I'm going to do in my speech. First, I'm going to clarify the differences between both houses. Secondly, I'm going to take down the assertions that came out within opening government. Fourthly, I'm going to assume that their assertions are true and why are they wrong, and I'm going to bring back whatever Audrey said because there's no response. But firstly, let's establish the assertions that came out within the other house. They don't understand how laws work. So for example, within Malaysia, we recognize that we have a new party going in. We have liberal politicians, i.e. Syed Saddiq, which are also younger politicians, but laws don't change. The reason being is because Syed Saddiq only holds a power within a particular district. I'm talking about Malaysia on live stream. So in other countries, because politicians hold power in particular districts, they lack the ability to be able to have the voice to be able to change this. For a law to change, you need politicians from multiple different districts, from multiple different countries, from multiple different states in order to be able to be a majority within your parliament. Therefore, you can get a law proposed. From there, if you have a two-third majority, you can get that law voted in. The other side of the house assumes that all of this is possible at the point in which you have few individuals in the status quo going out to campaign. That is already the status quo. That has systematically failed, and the reason being is because of their own characterization. In the majority of circumstances, the governments, the Sultan, and other individuals within these circumstances tend to be people who refuse or don't want to accept this, and don't want to accept this type of people, or don't want to accept this type of policies, and therefore laws in general cannot be guarded and changed. What we need from a side government is an understanding towards how these movements will inevitably lead to those laws, instead of assuming that it's possible. So as prioritization doesn't mean it's in the end, something that's inevitable and going to happen. But secondly, who benefits the movements on three levels of argumentation? So firstly, our side is a side that stands for the idea that education and the ability for us to change the minds and beliefs of individuals is something that should be prioritized. What does this look like? This looks like movements like the LGBT movement, the feminist movements going within societies and areas, i.e. Shah Alam or Kota Kemuning, having talks about why these things should be accepted. May not be the extremely liberal talks they would have in, for example, Kuala Lumpur, but it can be talks towards why we shouldn't hate gay people because it's in line with the religion, which actually happens in status quo, right? So Islam is a religion of hate, and therefore we shouldn't hate these individuals. These type of talks are particularly beneficial because it doesn't change you to be liberal, but it changes you to be less conservative in and of itself, meaning to say you're less likely to discriminate individuals. All these things takes high levels of funding, but more importantly, you create small sets of social bubbles that are not only less tensions towards individuals who are not part of your community, but more accepting towards these things. Second level of argumentation, why do we benefit the movement? Firstly, we recognize that social change is something that's extremely compoundable within these areas. That means we cannot adopt laws from white nations because they don't have the ability to be able to adopt within our current stature or current cultural changes. This is why the change in laws in America cannot be copied and replaced within Malaysia or India and so on, and we need to create new laws. But social change is very compoundable on four levels of understanding. Firstly, social groups have the ability to connect individuals of the same fights or the same plights in order for them to be partnered together. We need to say they're able to talk with individuals, and that is something that's very important to people who are systematically oppressed or systematically feel that they are wrong. Secondly, funding from groups, because you're more likely to be able to fund groups at the point in which you have better social understandings or grasp with other nations and the ability for them to do so. I.e., if I'm part of a white nation or white movement and I accept this idea, the point is I'm able to converse with individuals from other sides of the movement because there is a joining social movement for us to be able to move forward. It's something that's particularly beneficial because I am more likely to fund you when I understand your plight on a face-to-face basis in comparison to yourself at the house. Therapy, discussion, understanding, the capability to feel like you are not wrong and your existence is one that's not worth existing is particularly beneficial because we improve the lives of everyday individuals that happen on outside the house who are victims, and there is a comparative benefit that they will never obtain on the outside the house. But lastly, the ability for us to have large amount of voters with more funding because of these reasons allows us to change ideas and therefore create acceptance and policies, right? And the point is we have majority of individuals who are less likely to hit you. That means you have systematic grassroots movements that move up to recognize that politicians can change because the ideas on the ground change. On laws of the house, what the comparative is? A, laws are volatile. Not only do you get to vote that, not only do they not get voted in, but they'll get voted out really quickly when new parties come in. B, laws and politics are extremely villainizing in nature. At the point in which when you pass a policy that's controversial, I am more likely to oppose that policy in order for me just to get the seat, right? And that part of the idea, because I can get the seat from opposing that policy, is something that's important because I systematically shut you down. Thirdly, we recognize that laws are poorly enforced at the point in which the individuals on the ground don't want to enforce it. If your officers don't want to enforce it, if your legal teams don't want to enforce it, if your lawyers that are afforded to you by the state don't want to take care of you, then all these things lead to plea bargains that puts you within sentences. Laws not being enacted. Individuals forget what they want.
If your change in mass belief as well as attitude of the people don't work, what are the alternatives left for these poor and most vulnerable individuals?
In the worst case scenario, let's just say I can't change Kelantan, I can't change Shah Alam, anything. I get to feel that at least a few individuals on the ground and make them feel that they are not wrong. I get to show them a few websites with international individuals to let them understand what's going on, what their sexuality is, how to accept their gender. What do I do if I have a child and I don't want to have it? Or what do I do if I have a child and I want to have it? All these type of knowledge and accessibilities. If I give that to one woman, one LGBT person, there is a comparative benefit that I would not have gathered on your side of the house, or at least marginally better outside the house. But lastly, right, we're more likely to get this because it's easy to get. Therefore, educational changes come from these benefits are not easy to people to access because it's direct. Your laws don't necessarily lead to this, but more likely they to be challenged, right? It means you fight for laws, for example, education of LGBT being right, it's more likely for me to lead to, for example, education of LGBT being wrong within your religious textbooks, and all these changes to move forward. This way is simple. It's whether or not movements should prioritize the social understanding and the development within these developing nations or the political understanding. If a political climate is not stable, a political climate cannot move forward, a political climate cannot accept this, and a social climate cannot grow this, the benefit comes to the side of the house that proves you that there are more funding, more accepting, and more change in the long term. Side opening up.
Thank you, Diego, for the speech. I'd like to call on member of Brown.
Why are there so many pens here?
It's you have just go with it.
The reason why Alabama wanted to implement the heartbeat law to limit abortion is because the Roe v. Wade case did not guarantee absolute rights to women. However, even if these lawsuits, right, can be eventually somehow, even if these abortion rights can be somehow, can be somehow limited or can be somehow overturned by other opposing groups, we believe that this benefit is better under our side. So how do we differentiate ourselves from opening government? We will talk about courts, we will talk about legislation and how this will change minds, which they have not talked about. They only wanted to talk about protesting and how it will, and the urgency of it, but we will give you more levels of analysis. And I have several questions that I will answer in my speech. Firstly, is that how do courts and legislations gain change? And secondly, how do we actually garner more change under our side? So firstly, the role of courts. So what do we define courts as? A body that's independent, fair, and just literally follows the constitution. This means that courts are more likely to side with rights groups, women rights groups, for example, and minorities groups, as what we have seen in the United States. So how about in India, for example? We've seen the India Supreme Court upholding women's rights by allowing menstruating women to visit temples, holy temples, which they were once banned from. This is exactly, no thank you, the power of courts. Yes, we understand that under our side, this change is forced upon and people might not accept it. However, we will tell you that eventually these narratives will be watered down. So why are courts much more effective? The side opening opposition have conceded to us that changing minds are really hard. And we understand that the people who have wanted to change have already changed. The people who are on the fence would have already changed as well. And we are left with the hardcores who will fight towards the end to oppose us. This means that why waste money, why waste valuable time on these people when we can fight better legislation, when we can fight and win court case, no thank you, which can win us much more feats, right? And good examples would be all of the court cases that I've told you. But secondly, legislation. How do we sway legislation? We have lobby groups, right? And lobby groups, they get funding from the public. Side opening opposition wanted to tell us that they get more funding. We believe that this is not true because because the benefits that they will get is marginal. Why do we say so? Because even if they were to campaign more, all they would get is just a little bit more support, a little bit more people watering down their narratives. That's all from the heart. That's all that they will change when it comes to changing minds of hardcore people. This means that under their side, no thank you, they're just wasting more money to get fewer in return, right? So how do we actually pursue better legislative change? Because we donate to politicians, and in fact, women are a huge voter base in India, for example, in many other countries, and it's very easy for feminist groups. They don't even have to the feminist groups don't even have, no thank you, to persuade the male population. They just need to make sure that all of the women support them, vote for governments that are pro-women done, right? Okay. So this is how we get legislative change, we encourage change. And what's our worst case? Even if under our side we don't get any change in the short term, however, how do we still fare better under our side? At least we still get affiliation from some politicians that we can successfully lobby to, and they will form and these people will become the avenues where they will spark debates in Congress, where they will voice out and be vocal on these issues, right? So, no thank you. Moving on to my second extension. How do we actually change people's minds? So firstly, why don't people change in the first place? Because many of us fear the unknown. For instance, LGBT people. Why do many Muslims around the world oppose gay marriage? Because they fear that these gay people will overrun them, will cause them to become gay as well, and all of these stem from fear mongering by those religious, those bigots that exist in our society, not just the LGBT, but women's groups as well. Even in America, where white supremacists are claiming that that the black people are stealing our jobs and all these things. All these stem from the fear of the unknown. So how do we fix this? No, thank you. We fix this by changing the laws, by telling them that even if I were to legalize gay marriage in Malaysia, we won't see an increase in AIDS, in contraction of AIDS. Even if we were to legalize gay marriage in Malaysia, no thank you, we won't see all of a sudden gay populations rising drastically. All of these means that we prove to these bigots that they are wrong, that all the fear that they are trying to perpetrate, that they are trying to, no thank you, tell us are all false fallacy. So why is this important? Because instead of because hardcorers on the outside are much more open to change now, because we prove them wrong, no thank you. We tell them that they are able to change. We tell them that their interests will not be infringed, and they will be assured that these things won't affect their lives as they would imagine, right? So what's the benefit? We gain moderation on our side. We soften hardcore voices, we soften bigots, and they will eventually lose political ammunition. When instead of them harping on false fears that rely on just random narratives, right? We tell them that they are wrong. We tell them that even that gay people and Muslims can coexist. We tell them that white people and black people and Mexicans can coexist without white people losing substantially a lot, because we prove to them that even change will not, that these sorts of change, these sorts of progressive values won't cause major unrest in society as they would want to paint, right? We can shut their mouths up and we gain upper hand.
Thank you, Member of Gov. And now I'd like to invite Member of Opposition.
To be completely honest, I'm not the most well-read person on like the history of things that are happening across the world. I don't know what's happening in the 1800s in terms of laws and policies. And honestly, I feel like today's debate has been totally like when you overthink something, that's what the debate practically was. At the end of the day, I think the question is simple. When it comes to social movements and pushing for change, is it better for you to approach the government, or is it better for you to approach the people in order to change the very mentality that exists and improve the condition for these minorities? I have two extensions in my speech. The first is why a more personal, direct approach is much stronger and more impactful for the movement. And second is to explain why the long-term change achieved by understanding is a lot more sustainable compared to one that is like, I don't know, the one on God. So before that, most of my rebuttals will be integrated before just 4 things that I can understand, right? This is mostly towards so the first thing that they came up here to explain was this idea of how they have an obligation to change policies, and therefore it's something that's urgent. I think this argument is more to explain why there's an obligation for us to fight for these individuals, because open government didn't really talk about the nuance of urgency, which dismisses the very context of these countries, of these societies to begin with, right? Considering how difficult it is for these individuals to even accept LGBT members or women in the workforce, for example, we question how they would react in a world where you go and actively try to change the government that these individuals voted for. I think that's a burden which opening government didn't want to answer in today's debate, and I think that's why this argument doesn't run, right? Because they fail to acknowledge that it's difficult for you to support these very laws to begin with. It's difficult for individuals on the ground to support your pro-LGBT, pro-women laws because of the very conservative narratives that exist in the status quo. If they are found to be supporting these things, these are individuals who will be shamed. These are individuals who don't want to be publicly supporting the LGBT movement, for example, because doing so means they are tarnished as an individual. But even as politicians, it is difficult for them to advocate for those laws, because doing so means you lose existing voters that you previously had, and it's more difficult for you in the future. But even if you do get that law, we question the very treatment that you get. Opening opposition said that you get bad treatment. But I think they failed to explain why this bad treatment is one that is to happen. The reason why it happens is because when you change laws and you change the way people live their lives, you change the environment of their workforce, you change the schools that these individuals live in, you never change the core principles and understandings of these individuals, and those are often the very motivations behind their very bad actions. You paint these individuals as perpetrators. I think these are individuals who are misunderstood, and you need to tackle them properly and strategically. Just by actively changing the law, making a big move, you don't do yourself much good. Second is on this, like, how this idea of change is one that is top down. I think there's no explanation how that change happens. So the government tried to contest and say they will also explain how courts change, but I still don't think they explain how courts change in your world. If anything, I think the change that you get, even if you get your 1 or 2 policies, these are policies that are more likely to be tokenistic, if anything. Because you don't get people's understanding, this means people think that you are taking away laws. You are taking away spots in their office, spots in their schools for their kids who are not LGBT members, for their kids, for like their kids who aren't women to begin with, right? And that means you do not have understanding. It's more difficult for you to push laws in the future because you do not get that support whatsoever. Rather, you get more blame and more stick because you are a movement that is taking away spots, taking away avenue for individuals on the ground. I think that is the world which they need to defend. This last thing, just not let what you get away with this, is that they say that there's existing support in status quo, and therefore this is the most strategic time for us to pass laws. So like this line of argumentation concedes that in order for your laws to be successful, you require on-the-ground support. Therefore, if from closing opposition we can prove to you that you don't have on-the-ground support, your laws are not like good at the end of the day. Yeah, you all lose. So let's get into my extension. The first, why personal approach is much stronger for the movement. The premise to this argument is that people have very strong beliefs in this situation, in this context, and these are beliefs that are generational, right? And oftentimes these are beliefs which are discriminatory to minorities. These are individuals with strong beliefs, but the nuance is that these are individuals who do not think they are wrong. People who go out bashing LGBT members, scolding women, mansplaining, these are individuals who actually think that what they're doing is correct, right? And I think the approach in order to change that is one that is important. Let's compare the approach. In the world of government, this CJ's exact wording is that they want to prove these individuals wrong. What you do then is that these are individuals who feel more attacked. The point in which they feel attacked because their personal beliefs are being attacked, right? This means these are individuals who are less likely to open up. These are individuals who are less likely to concede in your discussions. Your discourse is one that is hostile, that is one where these individuals will be more rather than not defensive. Okay, so you didn't say this. So these are individuals who will be more defensive, and therefore you cannot get the understanding at the end of the day, right? Because why do they feel attacked? Because your move is one that is on such a large scale, right? So now you have more quotas, for example. So you go to the workforce and your environment is totally different. You are forced to treat these other individuals differently without understanding why you need to treat them differently, right? These are minorities who are being forced into their lives, and that is exactly why they are treated badly. Because of that defensive nature of these individuals, that's why they are treated badly as OO claim, CO provides you the nuance. What is the comparative in our law? We think a personal approach is a lot better. Before I proceed to explain that, yeah.
If individuals on the ground does not accept your nuance or narrative, that means they will still be discriminatory to women. For instance, what progress you will have in your side of the house?
Okay, so if I can prove that people on the ground can get that support, then that takes that POI down and your case down. I'll do that now. So with regards to personal approach, we think personal approach and attacking the beliefs and mentality of people on the ground includes a lot of real life examples. Saying things like these are words that you say to women which you shouldn't say. You shouldn't be mansplaining. You should be thinking more about the LGBT movement because these are situations that they go through. How do individuals interpret this? I think these are situations which is a lot more relatable compared to just a huge ass policy change which these people do not really understand where it stems from to begin with, right? So this means that the narratives we have are a lot stronger because people actually can relate to it and understand it. But the nuance is that these individuals have a safe space to interpret those messages. These are individuals who need to take those messages on a personal level. They don't need to drastically change their lives in a few days. They can sit down and understand and ask themselves questions. And that self-questioning is important in order to garner that support and garner that change for these individuals. But I think the comparative, in the long run, is that in the world of opposition, We get change via understanding. We do not have tokenistic issues, and the moment we change people's mentality, we change the way people vote, we change the way people treat individuals, and that's why the mentality is a core problem in today's debate. That's the one that's only closing opposition solves.
Thank you, member of opposition, for that speech. Now I'd like to call upon Councillor Davids.
I think this debate takes too many things for granted, in the sense that both the opposition teams think that negotiating and talking to people on the ground is as easy as they take it to be, right? So I'm going to quickly give you something, which is what CEO has brought to you today. Because CEO spends so much time doing rebuttals, they only got into one extension. I'm going to break it down for you of why personal approach is impossible on their side, right? Because the first thing they say is they establish that these individuals have a very strong belief, it's passed down by generations and generations, and most of you are unable to change, hence the discriminatory culture within it. So we think that because of that, it established the fact that they are unwilling to engage with you in conversation, because they already think that you're insignificant. They're unwilling to discuss with you because of the major differences you have with them. This means that, so why do we get that from our side? This is a quick rebuttal, right? Because we say that when you challenge the political legislations, when you challenge things that hold care about the elections and those political ideas that shape their country, they will actually feel some sort of pressure to negotiate with you. They have the pressure to actually have some sort of discourse with you. It's when you challenge the things that decide the country, is the part where the part when these individuals that you claim that have really strong beliefs that come out and willing to negotiate with you because they finally see you as a threat. Consider that on your side you don't have enough credibility to do so. So what exactly did you check on you today that there are some mistakenly understand? First of all, he set up the case that OG didn't manage to do so, right? This came from Roshan's question. When he asked about structural analysis of how to do it, we say go to the judicial systems because that doesn't mean majority. That determines what's right and what's wrong, what's progressive, what's good for the country. So we say that is able something that's using Supreme Court. It's a general, easy way that doesn't require you to generally garner all the ground support you need to make sure you are able to legalize change. But let's say we also are willing to go to legislative change. We're willing to lobby rules. And sure, even though if you don't have enough majority, we can't do so, you'll get some sort of politician credibility from that. We'll get among the 200 politicians in the world, we say there's probably one person in the parliament that's willing to support you and continue doing so. In that very case, you gain credibility for your movement. This means that all those things that they want to move, those discourse they want to have with people on the ground is more likely on our side because we actually have support from these politicians when we go out as well. Second thing that comes up from Yushan's speech about diluting your movement or getting people that don't understand, right? Because you're going to go to these constituencies, let's say you're a gay movement and you're going to talk to these people, and eventually you garner more and more support. What exactly this support? These people are straight people. And why do you say so? Why do you say that's a bit it's more harmful on your side? Because these people are unlikely to understand the pain that these gay individuals have gone through. They dilute the movement, the purpose of the movement, the quality of the movement. And that's what you should try to tell you. Yet again, unresponded. The last thing we have to tell you about breaking. We want to tell you about breaking the issue of fear, right? Because most of these individuals treat these things as a threat. Because the very moment you legalize it and make society, force society to accept it, you start to realize that this is something that's acceptable, this is something that's okay, we should move on this as a society. Right. So we're going to analyze the two issues that occurred within this debate. Number one, which sites harms more people. Second of all, which I can better credibility change ground use. But yes.
So regardless whether you want to go with the interpersonal discussion, which is the rehash of when we told you about the sex and bubbles and the discussions that happens here, if we would get policy change, the comparative benefit on site opposition is at the very least we get people on the ground to have or feel that they're safer among other people. What's the comparative benefit of your side? How's the best case?
But the problem with your whole analysis is that you don't provide us an analysis on how exactly you are able to negotiate these people without the credibility in the first place. Because we already established that they are so racist, they have such strong beliefs to themselves, you don't establish why they are willing to negotiate with us whenever it's such discriminatory beliefs. Right? So two issues, which I harm people more. So you say that, why do you say passing laws are beneficial? Because passing laws protect you from the most extreme, right? Because when you're going out to negotiate people, when you're going to talk to people, right, without we say that you can ensure that these social movements do not get harmed. Because when you're talking to people, you're likely to We want them to be as peaceful as possible, as simple as possible. But we say there are extremes in society that are most likely out there to physically harm these individuals. But especially when you have legislations that are doing so. So even if you take them at the best case, when say police forces are unwilling to uphold these things, say at the most extreme circumstances when people are harmed, these police forces, regardless of their views, will still try to protect them. So we say over here we can minimize the extreme discourse, extreme issues that come, physical issues that come up within the discourse, and make sure they are told, make sure and mitigate those things, right? We also tell you about and especially when you have government, there's some sort of government credibility and backing due to legislations being passed. At least from that perspective onwards, people are less likely to take more extreme measures of review. They're more likely to have more peaceful, for more peaceful. Second issue is that which side can better attain credibility to change ground views, right? Because we already told you that about the assertion that the assertions that Ovo tries to make about how they are discriminatory, how they are unlikely to listen to you. So let's like they have support. But secondly, realize that we don't think that there's more mechanisms that are trying to provide us when they go into Shala villages or go to Kuantan villages, give some speaks. We don't think that's good enough. Why do we say so, right? Because they're likely to just be influenced back by a community. That 1 hour you have with them will not equate to the few months they stay, few years and months they stay within their community. You see, they're easily influenced back to normal. You're less likely to get the support that you want, yes.
So in India, we have a lot of laws protecting women, but we have a lot of rape cases that go untestified. There are a lot of people who get killed in India, and there are a lot of women that get harmed in India. Your laws don't get changed if there's no one there to implement them because no one supports it. So how do you get this middle pathway?
But what we're trying to tell you is when there are laws that are existing, people will uphold it and will say that even if they don't hold a lead, they will still continue to make sure that in the more extreme circumstances, we still get some sort of benefit that at least we have some. We still get a benefit of at least some cases going in. And your side, you're just going to leave all the rape cases unaccounted for. Just for the very fact that even if they go up, even if you record them in the situations, they won't be protected by any sort of legislations. There are no sort of government protection agency to protect you. You say that at least on our side, we are able to protect some sort of individuals within these social movements, these individuals that are currently being harmed. You say that we are more likely to protect them, but the very fact that we have some sort of law, and there are some individuals within the police forces that will uphold it. On your side, the only benefit, you get no benefit from that. In the sense that you have no laws protecting them, you have no government agency protecting them. They're all on their own trying to make changes by themselves without any sort of credibility. So what's the most important thing today, right? We say that CG gives you a very important analysis about how credibility works in this. You can't just go up to someone and negotiate. You can't just go up to someone trying to negotiate for what you want if you don't have any sort of leverage, you have any sort of credibility. The bargaining chip here we push for is that we will go up we want to challenge the political system so people come up and challenge us too. So we can only have the sort of discourse that the CEO really wants, or that opposition really wants to. For all reasons, probably propose.
Thank you, Government, for the speech. Now I call on opposition.
You're fine? Okay.
It's okay.
If I was a minority individual, what would I want people to think of me as, right? I would definitely want people to respect me sincerely for who I am and not make them forced to be not make them be forced to respect me just because it's a law, okay? Now I have few rebuttals from what CJ said earlier. So let me start off with the GovWhip. The GovWhip said that the people will uphold the law, and my rebuttal towards that is that there are people who are stubborn on both sides, right? So the question is, right, when is it easier for them to change? In your world, you're making them hostile, and because of that, you make people discriminate them, and the news wouldn't be reported either because these minorities can be threatened into these bullies or these people who discriminate them. They are telling them not to report this because because if you do that, I will bully you even more. So these people are scared. So if you strengthen the laws, it can even make these things work. And also before that, the member of government also said that the laws need to be used for hardcore people who really can't change. And even if the laws are there, it can change this. It can somehow change these people in a way, but it can't really change the way the people think. You know, the way their mindset is about these minorities. So it's just the same thing about. It's just the same. They still have the same mindset that these minorities are people that are alienated in this world, and they don't belong to this world. And if you enforce the laws, you make people you have that feeling that, oh, now you can stop the feeling for them, like, and make them stop thinking that this you'll be okay with them anymore, because they when you strengthen these laws, you're making these people, like, you're forcing them to believe them. And when you have that feeling of when you force yourself to respect them, you tend to never ever like them again. And also Yu Chen also said about people fearing the unknown. And for an example, like what you said, legalizing gay marriages. What would the biggest think about that, right? They will feel even more disgusted that these people are allowed to be married even if they are gay, and they might even hate them even more. Okay. Moving on to the rebuts about the opening opposition. Sit down, please. I'll take it later. Opening opposition said that you can garner support from everyone that is here right now. Sit down, please. You can garner support from everyone who is siding the LGBT now, right? But it's hard to garner support it's hard to garner support from people who are against them, right? Because there are still half of these people in this world who are still against these people. And in order to have productive discussion, people need to realize they are wrong. And by that, you shouldn't these laws, if you enforce them, people would just follow them for the sake of it. People wouldn't actually change the way they think, and you're blocking that from their mind. Yeah. And that practically fails the policy given by opening government. And the obligation argument on GAP, right? It assumes that the laws will get passed, but it's difficult for people to follow it because people are conservative. People just don't change. And also, conservative parties might even lose their votes because if they change their laws, I'll take it later. People would if you change the laws for the party, people who actually voted for them earlier won't even vote for them anymore. So these parties, they lose their votes, you know. And even if the Republican changes, they will lose their votes as well. And,
so on the question of, say, equal pay, is urgency a concern on your side?
Urgency? I mean, we are just trying to make, instead of the laws, we are just forcing people, and it just stops there. I'm answering this back. It just stops there, and it just stops there. And if you make these people think about respecting them, it gets higher and higher. So it's better in this case instead of your case. And why is changing the government easier than changing these people, right? So like, why is changing the people easier than changing the government? Because this government forces people to change their ways, and they still have this hatred towards the minorities. Whereas if you let people change themselves, they will develop their ways of respecting these people. Okay. Now moving on to what my member said about the personal approach. Like, this gives these people space to express themselves. Like, people can actually sincerely be respected by others. And even if, like, a way to make these people think of these minorities as alienated people, to prevent that from happening, people should just think about themselves and think how would they feel. And that can work somehow for some people. And people shouldn't be mansplaining to movement like what my member said just now, because it's something wrong. And you should learn that other people are the same as you. And this minority and the people just have to take time to think about it and try communicating. That's another way of solving this problem in this world, right? And another thing is that it's also very hard to get laws. Okay, even if you get laws, like, the people are still gonna hate them. Like what the laws can barely even make a difference for people who hate them. You're just gonna develop the feeling of force, and that's just really, really bad in our side world.
And also just now, I think leader of opposition were being very convenient, saying that the laws are not very good. Okay, but even if the laws are true, right? Sit down, please. Even if the laws are true, right? People are going to discriminate them. I think even with my rebuttal here, I can rebut what OG just said just now. Okay, because like I said just now, this is because people don't change the way they think. And oh yeah, and another thing is that how many laws are you going to imply towards these minorities? Because you can't just keep expanding more laws, because it's just going to develop more and more hatred from these people, right? So that's something that we really don't want. Because if one law is already there by the government, if more laws are implied, these people are going to hate them even more, and right, maybe possibly even more people are going to hate them, and not just the same. And with that side of closing.
Thank you, opposition leader, for that speech. Now I'd like to invite all volunteers to come forward and shake hands. And please leave your room.
Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, I just need to go get my IC. Asisha is actually asking for IC. He wants to see whether I'm 19. Thank you. See, I told you someone to ask for IC. We can pass the IC there.